The morning mist clung to the towering glass facade of Walsh Technologies like a shroud casting ethereal shadows across the bustling streets of downtown Seattle. 7-year-old Lily Morgan stood at the base of the 40-story building, her small fingers clutching a wrinkled envelope against her chest. Her golden hair caught the filtered sunlight streaming through the clouds, and her piercing blue eyes reflected a determination that seemed far too mature for her young face. Mrs. Wilson, their elderly neighbor, placed a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder. "You're sure you want me to leave you here, sweetheart? I can come up with you." Lily shook her head firmly. "Mommy said I need to give this to Mr. Walsh myself. It's very important." She'd rehearsed what to say all morning. The lobby of Walsh Technologies buzzed with the controlled chaos of corporate life. Men and women in expensive suits hurried past marble pillars, their heels clicking against the polished floors like a symphony of ambition. Lily approached the imposing reception desk, where a woman with perfectly styled auburn hair and a crisp navy blazer sat behind a computer screen. "Excuse me, ma'am." Lily's voice barely rose above a whisper as she stood on her tiptoes to see over the desk. The letter in her hand was slightly damp from her nervous perspiration. The receptionist, Margaret Harrison, looked down with surprise at the unexpected visitor. "Well, hello there, sweetheart. Are you lost? Where are your parents?" Lily shook her head vigorously, her blonde curls bouncing. "I'm not lost. I need to give this letter to Mr. Walsh. My mommy said it's very, very important." She held up the envelope with both hands as if it were made of precious glass. Margaret glanced around the lobby, uncertain how to handle this unusual situation. "What's your name, honey?" "Lily Morgan. And this letter is for Mr. Walsh. Mommy wrote it and she said I had to make sure he reads it today because—" Lily's voice wavered slightly. "Because she might not be able to write any more letters soon." The innocence in Lily's voice, coupled with the gravity of her words, sent a chill down Margaret's spine. She looked at the envelope, noticing the careful handwriting that spelled out, "Alexander Walsh, CEO, urgent and personal," in elegant script. "Sweetheart, Mr. Walsh is a very busy man. He's in meetings all day. Please." Lily's blue eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall. "Mommy said this is the most important letter she's ever written. She said it might save both of us." Margaret felt her heart constrict. Something about this little girl's desperation resonated with her maternal instincts. Against all company protocol, she picked up her phone and dialed Alexander Walsh's direct line. 40 floors above Alexander Walsh sat in his corner office, a monument to success and isolation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Elliott Bay, but Alexander rarely noticed the beauty beyond the glass. His dark hair was impeccably styled, his charcoal gray suit pressed to perfection, and his steel blue eyes focused intently on quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk. At 33, Alexander had built Walsh Technologies from a small software startup into one of Seattle's most successful technology companies. But success had come at a cost. His office felt more like a fortress than a workplace designed to keep the world at a safe distance. The walls were lined with awards and accolades, but conspicuously absent of any personal photographs or mementos that might hint at a life beyond corporate achievement. His phone buzzed, interrupting his concentration. "Mr. Walsh," Margaret's voice came through the intercom. "I have an unusual situation down here. There's a little girl who insists on delivering a letter to you personally. She says it's urgent." Alexander's jaw tightened with irritation. "Margaret, you know I don't have time for sir. With all due respect, I think you should see this child. There's something different about this situation. The letter is marked personal and urgent, and she seems genuinely distressed." Alexander closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar tension headache beginning to form. His day was already packed with back-to-back meetings, and he had no patience for interruptions, especially ones involving children. But Margaret had been with the company for 8 years and had never made such a request before. "Fine," he said curtly. "Send her up, but make it quick." As Margaret escorted Lily to the executive elevator, the little girl's eyes widened with wonder at the opulent lobby. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on the walls, and abstract artwork worth more than most people's annual salaries adorned every corner. But Lily wasn't intimidated by the grandeur. She was focused solely on her mission. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like an eternity. Lily pressed her face against the glass wall of the elevator, watching Seattle shrink below her. "It's like being in the clouds," she whispered to Margaret, who smiled despite her nervousness about breaking protocol. When the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, Lily found herself in an executive suite that looked more like a luxury hotel than an office space. Thick Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, and original oil paintings hung between mahogany-paneled walls. Margaret led her down a corridor lined with conference rooms, each equipped with the latest technology. Mr. Walsh's office is just through those doors. Margaret pointed to a set of imposing double doors at the end of the hallway. Remember, he's very busy, so try to be brief, okay? Lily nodded solemnly and walked toward the doors with the measured steps of someone carrying the weight of the world on their small shoulders. She raised her tiny fist and knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in the quiet corridor. "Come in," came a deep, authoritative voice from within. Lily pushed open the heavy door and stepped into Alexander Walsh's domain. The office was even more impressive than the rest of the suite, with a massive desk positioned strategically in front of windows that offered a commanding view of the Seattle skyline. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he had stepped out of a business magazine cover. Alexander looked up from his computer screen, prepared to deal with yet another interruption to his carefully scheduled day. But when his eyes fell on Lily, something unexpected happened. The irritated expression on his face froze, replaced by something that looked almost like recognition, though he couldn't understand why. The little girl standing in his doorway had the most startling blue eyes he had ever seen, eyes that seemed to mirror his own with uncanny precision. Her golden hair caught the light from his desk lamp, and there was something about the shape of her face, the determined set of her small jaw, that seemed hauntingly familiar. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Alexander found himself studying Lily's features with an intensity that surprised him, while Lily stood frozen in the doorway, suddenly aware of the gravity of the moment her mother had prepared her for. "Are you Mr. Walsh?" Lily finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper in the vast office. Alexander cleared his throat, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had overcome him. "I'm Alexander Walsh, the CEO of this company. You must be the little girl with the letter." Lily nodded and walked across the plush carpet toward his desk, her small sneakers silent on the thick fibers. She held out the envelope with both hands, as if presenting a sacred offering. "My mommy wrote this for you. She said that it's very, very important and that you have to read it right now." Lily's eyes never left his face as she spoke, searching for something she couldn't name. Alexander took the envelope, noting how the paper felt slightly damp from Lily's nervous perspiration. The handwriting on the front was elegant but shaky, as if written by someone fighting against physical weakness. Something about that handwriting tugged at a memory buried deep in his mind, but he couldn't quite place it. He opened the envelope, carefully aware that Lily was watching his every movement with intense concentration. As he unfolded the letter, a faint scent of lavender wafted up from the paper, a fragrance that sent an unexpected jolt of recognition through his system. The letter was written on simple stationery, but the words it contained would shatter Alexander's carefully constructed world. "My dearest Alexander, I know this letter will come as a shock to you, and I pray you will find it in your heart to read it completely before making any judgments. My name is Sarah Morgan, though you knew me once as Sarah Peterson. 8 years ago, we shared something beautiful together, something that created the most precious gift I have ever received, our daughter Lily. I know what you must be thinking, and I know the circumstances under which we parted were painful and confusing. But Alexander, our daughter, needs you now, and I have nowhere else to turn. I am dying. The doctors give me perhaps 2 months, maybe less. I have exhausted all my savings on treatments that have only delayed the inevitable. Lily doesn't know how sick I am, but she knows that something is terribly wrong." Alexander's vision blurred as he read his successful businessman's facade cracking with each word. He glanced up at Lily, who was still watching him with those impossibly familiar blue eyes, and felt his world shifting on its axis. "Lily is everything good about both of us. She has your intelligence, your determination, and your beautiful eyes. She has been my strength through this illness, caring for me with a maturity that breaks my heart. She deserves so much more than I can give her now. She deserves a father who can provide for her, protect her, and love her the way every child should be loved." Alexander's chest felt tight, as if he couldn't draw enough air into his lungs. The little girl standing before him, this child who had seemed so familiar, was claiming to be his daughter. But that was impossible. He was sterile. The doctors had told him years ago that he would never be able to have children, a fact that had driven a wedge between him and every relationship he had ever attempted. "I know you believed you could never have children," Sarah's letter seemed to read his thoughts. "But the doctors were wrong, Alexander. Lily is living proof of that. She is 7 years old, born 9 months after that last beautiful night we spent together before everything fell apart. I never told you about the pregnancy because by then you believed I had betrayed you, and I was too proud and too hurt to fight for us anymore." Alexander's mind raced back to that terrible time 8 years ago. He remembered the photos that Rebecca had shown him, pictures that appeared to show Sarah with another man. He remembered the anonymous phone calls telling him that Sarah was cheating the witnesses who claimed to have seen her in compromising situations. The evidence had seemed overwhelming, and his trust, once broken, had never fully healed. "I don't expect you to believe me immediately, but I beg you to look at Lily and see the truth for yourself. More importantly, I beg you to get to know her. She is the most wonderful person I have ever known. And if something happens to me, she will have no one. Her grandparents are gone, and I have no siblings. You are her only hope for a future filled with love and security." The letter concluded with Sarah's address and phone number, along with a desperate plea for Alexander to visit them, if not for her sake, then for Lily's. The signature at the bottom was barely legible, as if Sarah had used the last of her strength to finish this final communication. Alexander set the letter down with trembling hands and looked up at Lily, seeing her with entirely new eyes. The shape of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the stubborn set of her jaw. It was like looking at a feminine version of his own childhood photographs. "Lily," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "How old are you, sweetheart?" "7," Lily replied, holding up 7 small fingers. "I'll be 8 in December. December 15th. Alexander's breath caught. December 15th was exactly 9 months after the last night he had spent with Sarah. The timeline matched perfectly, and the physical resemblance was undeniable. But more than that, there was something about Lily's presence that felt like coming home, as if a part of him he hadn't known was missing had suddenly been restored. Before he could respond, his office door burst open without a knock. Rebecca Taylor strode in, her high heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. She was dressed in a fitted red dress that emphasized her curves. Her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that accentuated her sharp cheekbones. At 29, Rebecca was undeniably beautiful, but there was a hardness in her brown eyes that became more pronounced when she was angry or threatened. "Alexander, darling, we're supposed to be at lunch with the Richardson account in 10 minutes, and Margaret said." Rebecca stopped mid-sentence as her gaze fell on Lily. Her expression shifted from irritation to something much more dangerous: recognition and fear. Rebecca's eyes darted between Alexander and Lily, taking in the unmistakable resemblance between them. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the way the color drained from her face as the implications hit her. For 8 years, she had been Alexander's girlfriend, carefully positioning herself as the sophisticated, childless woman who understood his career ambitions and shared his lifestyle. She had worked tirelessly to erase any trace of Sarah Peterson from his life, building their relationship on the foundation of lies she had constructed. "Who is this child?" Alexander, Rebecca asked, her voice carefully controlled, but with an underlying edge of panic. Alexander stood up slowly, the letter still clutched in his hand. "Rebecca, this is Lily. Lily, this is Miss Taylor." He couldn't bring himself to call Rebecca his girlfriend in front of the child who might be his daughter. Lily studied Rebecca with the frank curiosity of a child unaware of the adult tension swirling around her. "Are you Mr. Walsh's wife?" she asked innocently. Rebecca's laugh was sharp and forced. "Not yet, sweetheart, but hopefully someday." She moved closer to Alexander's desk, her eyes scanning the letter in his hands. "Alexander, what's going on here? Why is there a child in your office?" Alexander looked at Lily, then at Rebecca, feeling the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. "Lily brought me a letter from her mother. Her mother claims that Lily is my daughter." The words hung in the air like a live wire. Rebecca's composure cracked for just a moment, revealing the calculating panic beneath her polished exterior. She had spent years ensuring that Alexander would never discover the truth about Sarah, never learn about the child they had created together. And now, here was Lily, living proof of everything Rebecca had worked to hide. "Alexander, surely you don't believe—" But Alexander held up his hand to silence her. "Lily," he said, kneeling down to the child's eye level, "can you tell me about your mommy? Is she very sick?" Lily's lower lip trembled slightly, the first crack in the brave facade she had maintained all morning. "She gets really tired all the time, and sometimes she can't eat. She tries to hide it when she cries, but I hear her at night. The doctors keep giving her medicine, but it doesn't seem to help very much." Alexander felt his heart breaking at the child's words. Whether or not Lily was his biological daughter, she was clearly a little girl in crisis dealing with adult problems that no child should have to face. Where do you live, Lily? How did you get here today? We live in an apartment on Capitol Hill. Mrs. Wilson from next door brought me here. She's waiting downstairs. Mommy gave me this letter and said I needed to find you. She said I'm a very smart girl and that this was the most important job I'd ever have. Lily's pride in her accomplishment was evident despite the circumstances that had brought her there. Alexander's mind reeled at the thought of Sarah sending their daughter, if she was indeed their daughter, on such an important mission, carrying what might be the most important letter of his life. The courage it must have taken for Lily to make that journey and for Sarah to send her spoke to a desperation that cut him to the core. Rebecca interjected, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. You can't possibly be considering that this child is yours. Remember what the doctors told you years ago. You can't have children. But Alexander was no longer listening to Rebecca. He was lost in Lily's eyes, seeing in them the echo of every dream he had abandoned when he believed he could never be a father. The child standing before him represented the possibility of everything he had convinced himself he didn't want because it was impossible to have. Lily, he said gently, would you like to call your mommy and let her know you're safe? I think I'd like to meet her. Lily's face lit up with the first genuine smile Alexander had seen from her. Really, Mommy said you might not want to see us. She said you're a very important man with lots of important things to do. There's nothing more important than this, Alexander said, surprised by the conviction in his own voice. Nothing at all. As Alexander reached for his phone to call Sarah, Rebecca grabbed his arm with desperate intensity. Alexander, please think about this rationally. You have a company to run a life we've built together. You can't just throw everything away based on a letter from a woman who broke your heart 8 years ago. Alexander looked at Rebecca's perfectly manicured hand on his arm, then at Lily's small, trusting face. For the first time in years, the choice seemed crystal clear. Rebecca, cancel my afternoon appointments. Lily and I are going to visit her mother. The drive to Capitol Hill was tense and silent. Alexander had insisted that Rebecca stay at the office despite her protests and demands to accompany them. He drove his black BMW through the Seattle traffic with unusual care, constantly glancing in his rearview mirror at Lily, who sat in the back seat with a borrowed child safety seat that Margaret had somehow produced from the company's emergency supplies. Lily directed him through the winding streets of Capitol Hill. With surprising confidence, her small voice providing directions over the quiet hum of classical music from Alexander's radio. As they drove deeper into the residential neighborhood, Alexander noticed the gradual change from the polished business district to the more modest apartment buildings and small houses that characterized this part of the city. Turn here, Lily said as they approached a tree-lined street filled with older apartment complexes. We live in the blue building with the white steps. Alexander parked in front of a modest 3-story building that had seen better days. The blue paint was faded and peeling in places, and the small front yard was more dirt than grass. It was a world away from Alexander's luxury penthouse. But there was something about the building's obvious attempts at maintenance, flower boxes on some windows, a carefully swept front walkway that spoke to residents who cared about their home despite its limitations. Lily led him up 2 flights of narrow stairs, her small legs taking the steps with practiced ease. The hallway was dimly lit and smelled of cleaning products and cooking spices, a mixture of lives being lived in close proximity. They stopped in front of apartment 3B, and Lily pulled a small key from her pocket. Mommy, she called as she opened the door. I brought someone to see you, just like you asked. The apartment was tiny but meticulously clean, with sunlight streaming through windows that faced east toward downtown Seattle. The furniture was obviously secondhand but carefully arranged, and children's drawings were taped to the refrigerator and walls. It was clearly a home filled with love, even if it lacked material abundance. Sarah Morgan emerged from what Alexander assumed was the bedroom, and the sight of her hit him like a physical blow. She had always been beautiful, but now she was ethereally fragile. Her blonde hair thin and wispy from chemotherapy, her green eyes too large in her gaunt face. She wore a simple blue sweater and jeans that hung loosely on her diminished frame, but her smile when she saw Lily was radiant. Lily, sweetheart, you made it back safely. Sarah knelt down to embrace her daughter. Then her eyes met Alexander's over Lily's head, and the years seemed to collapse between them. "Hello, Alexander," Sarah said softly, her voice carrying the same melodic quality he remembered, but with an undertone of exhaustion that broke his heart. Sarah, Alexander found that his voice was barely functional. Seeing her again clearly ill and fighting for her life brought back every emotion he had spent years suppressing. "I got your letter." Lily looked back and forth between the two adults, sensing the weight of their shared history, even if she didn't understand it. "Mommy, is this my daddy?" she asked with the directness that only children possess. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her daughter, then at Alexander. "Sweetheart, this is Alexander Walsh. He's he's someone very special who knew Mommy a long time ago." Alexander knelt down beside Sarah and Lily, bringing himself to their eye level. Up close, the resemblance between himself and Lily was even more striking. They had the same eye color, the same shape of face, even the same small dimple in the left cheek that appeared when they smiled. "Lily," he said carefully, "your mommy and I need to talk about some grown-up things. Would you mind playing in your room for a little while?" Lily nodded solemnly and disappeared down the short hallway, but Alexander suspected she would be listening from behind her partially closed door. Children, he was learning, were much more perceptive than adults often gave them credit for. Sarah gestured for Alexander to sit on the small sofa, settling herself carefully in a chair across from him. Even that simple movement seemed to require effort, and Alexander found himself fighting the urge to help her, uncertain of the boundaries in this surreal situation. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Sarah said, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "When Lily told me she was going to find you and deliver the letter herself, I was terrified. But she was so determined, and I'm running out of options." Alexander studied Sarah's face, seeing past the illness to the woman he had once planned to marry. "Sarah, I need to know the truth. Is Lily really my daughter?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Alexander, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred on Lily's life, she is your daughter. She was conceived the last night we were together before everything fell apart between us. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after we broke up, but the doctors told me I was sterile." Alexander said, confusion evident in his voice. "The tests, the diagnosis, medical tests can be wrong," Sarah replied. "Or maybe the situation changed. I don't know the medical explanation, Alexander. All I know is that Lily exists and she's ours." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "Why didn't you tell me when you found out you were pregnant? Why let me believe all these years that I could never have children?" Sarah's composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "Because you thought I had betrayed you. You wouldn't take my calls, wouldn't see me. Your secretary had instructions not to put me through. I tried, Alexander. I tried so hard to reach you, but you had already decided I was a liar and a cheat." The pain in Sarah's voice was raw and immediate, bringing back memories that Alexander had worked hard to bury. He remembered his own agony during that time, the way her supposed betrayal had shattered his ability to trust anyone completely. "The evidence seemed overwhelming," he said quietly. "The photos, the witnesses, the phone calls." "What photos?" Sarah asked, confusion replacing pain in her expression. "What witnesses, Alexander? What are you talking about?" Before Alexander could respond, Lily appeared in the doorway, her young face creased with concern. "Mommy, why are you crying? Are you sicker?" Sarah quickly wiped her tears and smiled at her daughter. "No, sweetheart, these are happy tears. I'm crying because I'm happy that Mr. Alexander came to visit us." Lily studied both adults with the penetrating gaze that Alexander was beginning to recognize as one of her defining characteristics. "Are you my daddy?" she asked Alexander directly, her blue eyes searching his face for the truth. Alexander felt the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This little girl deserved honesty, but he also needed certainty before he made any commitments that would change all their lives forever. "Lily," he said carefully, "I need to do some tests to make sure, but I promise you, if I am your daddy, I will do everything I can to take care of both you and your mommy." Lily nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable response. "Mommy says tests are important. She has lots of tests at the hospital." The mention of Sarah's medical situation brought Alexander back to the immediate crisis at hand. "Sarah, tell me about your condition. What exactly are the doctors saying?" Sarah glanced meaningfully at Lily, who was still hovering in the doorway. "Lily, sweetheart, would you go color in your coloring book?" While Mr. Alexander and I finished talking, after Lily reluctantly disappeared again, Sarah's mask of strength finally slipped completely. It's ovarian cancer stage 4. It had already spread by the time they found it. I've been through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, but she trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging heavy in the air. What do the doctors say about treatment options? Alexander asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. There is an experimental treatment at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. It's shown promise in similar cases, but insurance won't cover it, and I can't afford it. The cost is astronomical, over $200,000 just for the first phase. Sarah's voice was steady, but Alexander could see the desperation she was trying to hide. $200,000. For Alexander, it was less than he spent on his car. The realization of the different worlds they inhabited hit him with stunning clarity. While he lived in luxury, Sarah was literally dying from lack of funds for treatment. Sarah, regardless of the paternity test results, I want you to start that treatment immediately. I'll cover the costs. Sarah stared at him in shock. Alexander, you can't possibly— Yes, I can, he interrupted firmly. Lily needs her mother, and He paused, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. I can't bear the thought of losing you again. Not like this. From down the hallway came the sound of Lily's voice talking to what Alexander assumed were her dolls or stuffed animals. My daddy came to visit today, she was saying. He's very tall and has blue eyes just like mine. I think he's going to help Mommy get better. The innocent certainty in Lily's voice cut through Alexander's heart like a blade. This child had already accepted him, as her father was already building dreams around his presence in their lives. The responsibility of that trust was both terrifying and exhilarating. I need to arrange for a DNA test, Alexander said quietly. Not because I don't believe you, but because I need legal documentation for Lily's sake. If she's my daughter, I want to make sure she's protected, that she has every right and benefit that should come with that. Sarah nodded in understanding the practical implications. Of course, whatever you need. In the meantime, I'm going to make some calls about your treatment. There's no reason to wait for test results to get you the medical care you need. As Alexander pulled out his phone to begin making arrangements, Sarah watched him with an expression of wonder and gratitude. Alexander, why are you doing this? After everything that happened between us, why are you willing to help? Alexander looked toward the hallway where Lily's voice could still be heard now, singing a soft lullaby to her toys. Because 8 years ago, I lost the 2 most important things in my life, you and the family we could have had together. I may not understand what happened back then, but I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. That evening, Alexander returned to his penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, with his mind reeling from the day's revelations. The luxury of his home felt almost obscene after seeing Sarah and Lily's modest apartment. His living room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, could have housed their entire apartment twice over. Rebecca was waiting for him, pacing the marble floors in an elegant black cocktail dress. She had obviously gone home to change and prepare for what she expected to be an important conversation about their future. Alexander, finally, she said, rushing to greet him. I've been worried sick. How did it go with that woman and her child? Alexander loosened his tie and walked to the bar cart in the corner of the room, pouring himself a generous glass of single malt scotch. Her name is Sarah Rebecca. Sarah Morgan, and her daughter's name is Lily. Fine, Sarah and Lily, Rebecca said impatiently. What do they want? Money? Some kind of settlement to go away? Alexander turned to face Rebecca, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in their 2-year relationship. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and ambitious. Everything he had thought he wanted in a partner, but looking at her now, he realized how cold her beauty was, how calculating her every move. They didn't want anything except for me to know the truth, Alexander said. Sarah is dying, Rebecca. She has cancer, and she wanted me to know that Lily is my daughter. Rebecca's laugh was sharp and bitter. Alexander, please. You can't have children. We've discussed this countless times. It's one of the reasons our relationship works so well. Neither of us wants to be tied down by children. The medical diagnosis was wrong, Alexander said quietly. Or circumstances changed. I don't know the exact explanation, but Lily is my daughter. The resemblance alone is proof enough, but I've arranged for a DNA test to make it official. Rebecca's composure began to crack, revealing the desperation beneath her polished exterior. Alexander, you can't be serious. You have responsibilities here. The company needs you. I need you. We have plans for our future together. What kind of future? Rebecca, Alexander asked, genuinely curious. A future where I work 18-hour days and you attend charity events, and plan vacations. A future where we congratulate ourselves on our success while my daughter grows up without a father. Your alleged daughter, Rebecca corrected sharply. Alexander, this woman abandoned you 8 years ago. She broke your heart. Remember, now she's dying and desperate, so she shows up with some child and claims it's yours. Can't you see what she's doing? Alexander studied Rebecca's face, noting the panic barely concealed beneath her anger. Something about her reaction seemed disproportionate to the situation. Rebecca, what exactly happened? 8 years ago, what really happened? Rebecca's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. What do you mean? You know what happened. Sarah was cheating on you. There were photos, witnesses. You were devastated. I want to see those photos again, Alexander said. And I want the names of those witnesses. Alexander, that's ancient history. Why dredge up painful memories? Because I need to understand the truth for Lily's sake and for my own. Alexander's voice carried a note of steel that Rebecca had rarely heard. I've made arrangements for Sarah to begin treatment at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance tomorrow. I've also arranged for Lily to stay with a nanny during the day while Sarah undergoes therapy. Rebecca stared at him as if he had lost his mind. You're paying for her treatment, Alexander, that will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for a woman who betrayed you and a child who probably isn't even yours. Even if Lily isn't my biological daughter, which I believe she is, she's an innocent child whose mother is dying. How could I live with myself if I had the power to help and chose not to? Rebecca's mask finally slipped, completely revealing the calculating woman beneath. Because it's not your responsibility, because you have obligations to the people who have stood by you, who have built a life with you. Because throwing money at some woman's sob story isn't going to bring back whatever fantasy relationship you think you had with her 8 years ago. Alexander set down his scotch glass with deliberate care, the crystal ringing against the marble countertop. Rebecca, I think you should leave. Alexander, please don't let emotions cloud your judgment. We can work through this together. Maybe we could help the child in some other way. Set up a trust fund or something, but you don't need to get personally involved. I said you should leave, Alexander repeated, his voice quiet but final. Rebecca stared at him for a long moment, seeming to realize that her usual tactics weren't working. Fine, but Alexander, when this fantasy implodes and you realize you've been manipulated, don't expect me to be waiting around to pick up the pieces. After Rebecca left, Alexander stood alone in his penthouse, looking out at the lights of Seattle reflected in the dark waters of the bay. For the first time in years, his home felt empty, not because he was alone, but because the people who mattered weren't there with him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Dr. Michael Mitchell, his personal physician and longtime friend. Mike, it's Alexander. I need a favor. I need a DNA test done as quickly and accurately as possible, and I need it done with complete discretion. Alexander, it's 11 o'clock at night. What's this about? Alexander walked to his window, looking out over the city, where Sarah and Lily were probably sleeping in their small apartment. Mike, I think I might be a father. The next morning, Alexander arrived at Sarah and Lily's apartment with coffee, fresh pastries from a French bakery, and a car seat properly installed in his BMW. Sarah answered the door wearing the same clothes from the day before, but she had attempted to style her thinning hair and apply a small amount of makeup. Alexander, you didn't have to bring breakfast, Sarah protested, but gratefully accepted the coffee. Mommy, look, Lily exclaimed, running to the window. There's a really fancy car outside. It's so shiny. That's Mr. Alexander's car, sweetheart, Sarah explained. He's going to drive us to the hospital today. Lily's eyes widened with excitement. Really, can I sit in the front seat? You'll sit in the back seat with a special car seat, just like a race car driver, Alexander said, kneeling down to Lily's level. Safety first, right? As they drove to the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, Alexander found himself studying Lily in the rearview mirror. She chattered continuously, pointing out interesting buildings, asking questions about how cars worked, and wondering aloud about whether the hospital would have good food in their cafeteria. Lily, you're quite the conversationalist, Alexander observed with a smile. What's a conversationalist? Lily asked, struggling with the big word. It means you're really good at talking and asking interesting questions, Alexander explained, smiling at her in the mirror. Mommy says I ask too many questions sometimes, Lily replied thoughtfully, but she says curious people learn more about the world. Sarah reached back from the front seat to squeeze Lily's hand. That's right, sweetheart. Questions are how we discover new things. The Seattle Cancer Care Alliance was a modern facility nestled in the heart of the city's medical district. As they walked through the gleaming lobby, Lily stayed close to her mother's side, her usual chatter subdued by the clinical atmosphere. Alexander found himself fighting an unexpected surge of protectiveness as he watched Sarah navigate the check-in process with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Morgan, the receptionist, said warmly, "Dr. Martinez is ready to see you, and I understand your treatment has been approved for immediate start." Sarah looked at Alexander with tears in her eyes. "Yes, that's correct." While Sarah was whisked away for consultations and preparations, Alexander and Lily found themselves in the children's waiting area, a cheerfully decorated space with books, toys, and a small play kitchen. "Are you scared for Mommy?" Lily asked, suddenly settling beside Alexander on a child-sized couch that barely accommodated his tall frame. The directness of her question caught him off guard. "Yes, I'm a little scared. Me too." Lily nodded solemnly. "I'm scared all the time. But Mommy says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you're scared." Alexander felt something shift in his chest as he looked at this remarkable little girl. "Your mommy is very wise and very brave. Are you going to be my daddy?" Lily asked, her blue eyes searching his face with heartbreaking hope. Alexander chose his words carefully. "Lily, I hope very much that I am your daddy. We need to do a special test to make sure. But regardless of what that test says, I promise you that I will always be here to help take care of you and your mommy." Lily considered this for a moment, then reached over and took his hand in both of her small ones. "I think you are my daddy. You have the same hands as me. See?" She placed her tiny palm against his much larger one, and Alexander was amazed to see that she was right. They had the same long fingers, the same shape to their nails. 3 hours later, Sarah emerged from the treatment area looking exhausted but hopeful. The experimental chemotherapy would be administered over several months with treatments 3 times per week. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about her response to the new protocol. "How do you feel?" Mommy Lily asked, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist. Tired but hopeful, Sarah replied honestly, "Dr. Martinez thinks this new medicine might help me get better." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Mitchell. The DNA test could be conducted that afternoon with results available within 48 hours. Alexander showed the message to Sarah, who nodded her agreement. The DNA test itself was simple and quick. Just a cheek swab for both Alexander and Lily. Lily found the whole process fascinating, asking the lab technician dozens of questions about how they could tell if people were related just from spit. "It's like a puzzle, sweetheart," the technician explained patiently. "Everyone has special markers that they get from their mommy and daddy. If Mr. Alexander is your daddy, you'll have some of the same markers he has." "Like a secret code?" Lily asked excitedly. "Exactly like a secret code." That evening, Alexander insisted on taking Sarah and Lily to dinner at a family restaurant near their apartment. As they sat in a booth sharing pizza and talking about Lily's school and her favorite subjects, Alexander felt a sense of rightness that he hadn't experienced in years. "Tell me about your life," Lily, Alexander said as she carefully picked pepperoni off her pizza slice. "What do you like to do for fun?" "I like to read," Lily said seriously, "and I like to draw pictures, and I help Mommy with cooking and cleaning because she gets tired easily." Sarah's expression grew sad as she listened to her daughter describe the adult responsibilities she had taken on. "Lily is my little helper," she said softly. "Sometimes I think she takes care of me more than I take care of her." "Mommy, that's what families do," Lily said matter-of-factly. "They take care of each other." Alexander found himself profoundly moved by the 7-year-old's wisdom and maturity. Whatever the DNA test revealed, Lily was an extraordinary child who deserved every opportunity life could offer. After dinner, Alexander walked them back to their apartment, carrying a sleeping Lily in his arms. She had dozed off in the restaurant, exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. As he carried her up the narrow stairs, Alexander marveled at how perfectly she fit in his arms, how natural it felt to hold her. "She likes you," Sarah observed quietly, as Alexander gently placed Lily on her small bed, not bothering to change her clothes. "I like her too," Alexander replied, smoothing Lily's blonde hair away from her face. "She's remarkable, Sarah. You've done an incredible job raising her." Sarah smiled sadly. "I've done my best, but it hasn't been easy. There are so many things I wish I could give her. Music lessons, dance classes, trips to the zoo, just normal childhood experiences that cost money I don't have." "Those things can be arranged," Alexander said softly. "All of them." As they stood in Lily's doorway watching her sleep, Sarah finally asked the question that had been weighing on both their minds. Alexander, what happens if the DNA test is negative? What happens if Lily isn't your biological daughter? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. Sarah, in the past 48 hours, that little girl has changed something fundamental inside me. Biology is just science. What matters is love, commitment, and choice. If Lily isn't my biological daughter, I'd like to discuss adopting her anyway. Sarah stared at him in shock. Alexander, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Alexander replied. I spent 8 years convinced I could never be a father, never have a family. Now I discover I might have had both all along. I'm not going to waste any more time. The next day brought unexpected complications. Alexander arrived at his office to find Rebecca waiting in his conference room with a stack of legal documents and a grim expression. Alexander, we need to talk. I've been doing some research into your Sarah Morgan, and you need to see what I found. Alexander reluctantly took the chair across from her, noting the triumphant gleam in Rebecca's eyes. What kind of research? The kind that reveals the truth about the woman you are so eager to rescue. Rebecca slid a folder across the table. Sarah Morgan has quite an interesting history. Did you know she was married 2 years ago to a man named James Miller? Alexander's blood ran cold as he opened the folder to find copies of a marriage certificate and several photographs showing Sarah in a wedding dress kissing a tall man with dark hair. The marriage was annulled after 6 months. Rebecca continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Apparently, Mr. Miller discovered that Sarah had been less than honest about several aspects of her past, including the existence of a child. Alexander stared at the documents, feeling the familiar sensation of having the ground shift beneath his feet. When was this marriage? 2 years ago. Which means Sarah was playing house with another man while raising the child she claims is yours. Alexander, doesn't this pattern seem familiar? Doesn't it remind you of what happened 8 years ago? Before Alexander could respond, his assistant knocked on the conference room door. Mr. Walsh, Dr. Mitchell is on line 1. He says it's urgent regarding the test results you've been waiting for. Alexander's heart pounded as he reached for the phone. It had only been 24 hours since the DNA test was administered, but Dr. Mitchell had promised to rush the results. Mike, what do you have for me? Alexander, I have the preliminary results. I wanted to call you immediately because... Dr. Mitchell paused and Alexander could hear papers shuffling in the background. Alexander, the test results are negative. There's no biological relationship between you and the child. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He felt Rebecca's hand on his shoulder, her voice offering comfort that sounded hollow in his ears. Alexander, I'm so sorry. I know this must be devastating. Alexander ended the call in a daze, staring at the marriage certificate and photos spread across the conference table. Sarah had lied to him again, just like 8 years ago. She had created an elaborate deception, this time using an innocent child as a pawn. Alexander, we know this hurts. Rebecca's voice turned gentle. But now you can see the truth. Sarah Morgan is a manipulator who preys on successful men. First you, then this Miller fellow, now you again. She's using her illness to extract money from you. Lily isn't dying, Alexander said quietly. Sarah is. Details. Rebecca waved dismissively. The point is, you've been manipulated again. But it's not too late to extricate yourself from this situation cleanly. Alexander stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward into the wall. I need to see Sarah. I need to hear her explanation. Alexander, what explanation could possibly justify this level of deception? Rebecca called after him as he headed for the door. You owe her nothing. But Alexander was already gone, his mind reeling with questions and anger and a heartbreak that felt all too familiar. As he drove toward Capitol Hill, he tried to reconcile the Sarah he had been falling in love with all over again, with the woman who could orchestrate such an elaborate lie. When he arrived at Sarah's apartment, he found her in the middle of packing boxes, her movements slow and deliberate due to the effects of her chemotherapy treatment. Alexander. She looked up with surprise and pleasure. I wasn't expecting you until this evening. How did the DNA results? She stopped mid-sentence when she saw his expression. We need to talk, Alexander said curtly. About James Miller, about your marriage 2 years ago, about the lies you've been telling me. Sarah's face went white, and she sank into her chair as if her legs could no longer support her. Alexander, I can explain. Can you? Alexander interrupted, his voice cold with controlled anger. Can you explain why you failed to mention that you were married 2 years ago? Can you explain why that marriage was annulled when your husband discovered you had been lying to him? And can you explain why the DNA test came back negative? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she met his gaze steadily. The DNA test was negative. Don't act surprised, Sarah. Did you really think I wouldn't find out the truth eventually, Alexander? Please let me explain everything. Yes, I was married to James. Yes, it ended badly, but not for the reasons you think. And the DNA test. There must be some mistake. The mistake was trusting you again. Alexander said, his heart breaking even as he spoke the words. 8 years ago, I thought you had betrayed me. I spent all this time wondering if I had been wrong, if I had thrown away the best thing in my life. Now I discover that my instincts were right all along. Alexander, please, Sarah pleaded, struggling to stand. I know how this looks, but you have to believe me. Lily is your daughter. I don't know why the test came back negative, but there has to be an explanation. Where is Lily? Alexander asked suddenly, realizing the apartment was too quiet. She's at school. Alexander, please don't leave things like this. Please let me explain about James. About everything. Alexander looked at Sarah, seeing past her illness to the woman who had apparently manipulated him twice. I've heard enough explanations, Sarah. I've made arrangements for your treatment to continue through the end of the month. After that, you're on your own. As Alexander turned to leave, Sarah called after him with desperation in her voice. Alexander, I love you. I've never stopped loving you. Lily is your daughter, no matter what any test says. Please don't abandon us again. But Alexander was already gone, leaving Sarah alone with her boxes and her fears and the growing certainty that someone was working very hard to destroy any chance of happiness she might have found. That evening, Alexander sat in his penthouse with Rebecca, staring out at the city lights and trying to process the day's revelations. Rebecca had opened a bottle of expensive wine and was doing her best to comfort him, but Alexander felt numb and empty. I should have listened to you, Alexander said finally. I should have known better than to trust her again. Alexander, you're a good man. Rebecca settled beside him on the leather sofa. Your instinct is to help people to see the best in them. Sarah took advantage of that kindness. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text message. Against his better judgment, he looked at it, expecting another plea from Sarah. Instead, it was from Lily, typed in the careful phonetic spelling of a 7-year-old. Mr. Alexander, why are you mad at Mommy? She is crying and won't tell me why. Did I do something wrong? I promise I will be better. Please don't be mad at us. Alexander stared at the message, feeling his heart shatter completely. Whatever Sarah had done, Lily was an innocent victim caught in the crossfire of adult deceptions and broken trust. Who's texting you? Rebecca asked, noticing his expression. Lily. She's asking why I'm angry with her mother. Rebecca's expression hardened slightly. Alexander, you can't let a child's emotions manipulate you. Sarah is probably coaching her on what to say, but Alexander couldn't shake the image of Lily sitting in her small apartment, confused and frightened by the sudden absence of the man she had begun to think of as her father. He typed back carefully. Lily, you didn't do anything wrong. You are perfect just the way you are. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that have nothing to do with little girls. Take care of your mommy. Lily's response came back immediately. Will you still be my daddy even if you are mad at Mommy? Alexander stared at the question that cut to the heart of everything he was feeling. Whether or not Lily was his biological daughter, she had already claimed a place in his heart. Could he really walk away from her because of Sarah's deceptions? Before he could answer, another text arrived. Mommy says the test was wrong. She says sometimes tests make mistakes. I think you're my daddy because you have my eyes. Alexander set his phone down and walked to the window, his reflection staring back at him from the dark glass. Behind him, Rebecca was watching his every move with calculating eyes. Alexander, you can't seriously be considering continuing this relationship after everything you've learned today. Lily didn't lie to me, Alexander said quietly. Lily didn't deceive me or manipulate me. Lily is just a little girl who needs someone to care about her. Lily is Sarah's daughter, not yours. You have no legal obligation to her, no moral responsibility. You've already paid for Sarah's medical treatment, which is more than generous under the circumstances. Alexander turned from the window to face Rebecca, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in their relationship. Rebecca, when did you become so cold? When did you become someone who could dismiss a child's welfare so easily? Rebecca's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something calculating and desperate underneath. I became realistic. Alexander, I learned to protect the people I care about from being taken advantage of by manipulative people. Or maybe Alexander said slowly, pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place in his mind. Maybe you became someone who manipulates situations to get what she wants. Rebecca's face flushed with anger. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm beginning to wonder about the evidence that broke Sarah and me up 8 years ago. It means I'm wondering about the convenient timing of your research into Sarah's marriage. And it means I'm wondering about DNA test results that came back faster than they should have. Alexander, you're being paranoid. The stress of this situation is affecting your judgment. But Alexander was already reaching for his phone, scrolling through his contacts. Mike Mitchell is not just my doctor, he's my friend. He's also one of the most ethical people I know. I think I'll give him a call and ask some very specific questions about how that DNA test was processed. Rebecca's face went pale. Alexander, you're overreacting. Why would anyone want to tamper with a DNA test? That's an excellent question, Alexander replied, his finger hovering over Dr. Mitchell's number. I'm sure Mike will have some interesting insights. As Alexander placed the call, Rebecca quietly gathered her purse and coat, moving toward the door with the stealth of someone who didn't want to be part of the conversation that was about to take place. Mike, it's Alexander again. I need to ask you some very specific questions about the DNA test you processed for me. Questions about chain of custody, about who had access to the samples, and about whether it's possible for results to be tampered with. Dr. Mitchell's voice was puzzled but concerned. Alexander, those are odd questions. Is there some reason you suspect the results might not be accurate? Let's just say I'm beginning to question whether everyone involved in this process had honest intentions. Alexander, I have to tell you, there was something unusual about your test. Rebecca Taylor called my office yesterday morning claiming to be calling on your behalf. She wanted to know about the processing timeline and the security protocols we use. My staff told her those details were confidential, but Alexander's blood ran cold. But what, Mike? But later that day, there was a brief power outage in our lab. Nothing serious, just a few minutes. When power was restored, we discovered that one of our lab technicians had to rerun several tests because of computer glitches caused by the outage, including yours. Mike, I need you to rerun that test immediately. New samples, different lab, maximum security protocols, and I need the original samples tested by an independent laboratory. Alexander, that's going to take several days and cost significantly more. I don't care about the cost, I care about the truth. After ending the call, Alexander looked around his empty penthouse, realizing that Rebecca had slipped away during his conversation with Dr. Mitchell. For the first time in their 2-year relationship, he was grateful for her absence. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Lily's number, typing carefully. Lily, I'm sorry for worrying you. There was a mistake with the test, and we need to do it again. I hope that's okay with you. Her response came back within minutes. Yes, it's okay. Mommy says mistakes happen all the time. She says the important thing is fixing them. Are you coming to see us tomorrow? Alexander smiled for the first time in 24 hours. Yes, I'll see you tomorrow. Tell your mommy I'd like to talk to her about something very important. Yay, Mommy will be so happy. She misses you a lot. As Alexander prepared for bed that night, he felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. If his suspicions about Rebecca were correct, then Sarah might be innocent of the deceptions he had accused her of. But that would also mean that the woman he had been involved with for 2 years was capable of manipulating DNA test results to destroy his chance at happiness. The next morning, Alexander arrived at Sarah's apartment to find her in the middle of unpacking the boxes she had been packing the day before. She looked up when he knocked, her expression wary but hopeful. Alexander, she opened the door wider to let him in. I wasn't sure I'd see you again. Sarah, I owe you an apology and an explanation. Alexander settled on her small sofa, noting that Lily was at school and they could speak freely. I have reason to believe that the DNA test results were tampered with. Sarah stared at him in shock. Tampered with by whom? Rebecca Taylor. My girlfriend. My ex-girlfriend, Alexander corrected himself. Sarah, I need you to tell me about James Miller. I need to understand what really happened with your marriage. Sarah took a deep breath as if steeling herself for a difficult conversation. James was a mistake, a rebound relationship that I entered into when Lily was 5. He seemed kind and stable, and I thought Lily needed a father figure in her life. Why was the marriage annulled? Because I lied to him. Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, not about Lily's paternity. I never told him who Lily's father was. I lied about my feelings. I married him hoping I could learn to love him, but I couldn't. I was still in love with you, Alexander. I never stopped being in love with you. Alexander felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. Why didn't you tell me about the marriage yesterday? Because I was ashamed, because I knew how it would look, because I was afraid you'd think I was the kind of person who uses men, when the truth is that James was the only other relationship I've had since you, and it failed precisely because I couldn't get over you. Alexander reached across the small space between them and took Sarah's hand in his. Sarah, 8 years ago, someone convinced me that you were cheating on me. They had photos, witnesses, evidence that seemed overwhelming. I never questioned it because I was young and insecure and afraid that someone like you could never really love someone like me. Alexander, I never cheated on you. I never even looked at another man the entire time we were together. You were everything to me. I'm beginning to think we were both victims of someone else's manipulation, Alexander said quietly. Someone who wanted to keep us apart 8 years ago and who is trying to do it again now. Before Sarah could respond, Alexander's phone rang. Dr. Mitchell's name appeared on the screen, and Alexander answered immediately. Mike, please tell me you have news. Alexander, I have very disturbing news. The original DNA samples were definitely tampered with. Someone introduced a foreign substance that would cause a false negative result. But we ran the new test you requested, and Alexander, you need to sit down for this. I'm sitting. What are the results? Alexander, Lily is definitely your daughter. There's no question whatsoever. The paternity probability is 99.97%. Alexander felt the world shift back into focus, colors becoming brighter and sounds becoming clearer. He looked at Sarah, who was watching his face with desperate hope. She's mine, he said softly. Lily is my daughter. Sarah burst into tears, covering her face with her hands as relief flooded through her. I knew it, she sobbed. I knew the test was wrong. Alexander, I would never lie to you about something so important. Alexander ended the call and pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her as she cried against his chest. Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for doubting you, for believing the worst, for walking away. I'm sorry for 8 years of missed bedtime stories and birthday parties and first days of school. You're here now, Sarah whispered against his shirt. That's what matters. You're here now. They held each other in the small apartment, two people who had lost 8 years of their lives to lies and manipulation, finally finding their way back to each other. When Sarah finally pulled back to look at his face, Alexander gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. Sarah, there's something else we need to discuss. I think Rebecca was involved in what happened 8 years ago, too. I think she's been manipulating both of us for a very long time. Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. Rebecca Taylor, I remember her from when we were dating. She worked at your company then, too, didn't she? She did, and she was always around, always offering to help with problems, always ready with information that seemed to prove your betrayal. Alexander felt anger building in his chest as he began to see the pattern that had been hidden for so long. Alexander, what are we going to do? Before Alexander could answer, the apartment door burst open and Lily ran in, still wearing her school backpack and chattering excitedly about her day. She stopped short when she saw Alexander and Sarah sitting together on the sofa, their faces serious. Are you guys sad? Lily asked, her young face creased with concern. No, sweetheart, Alexander said, opening his arms to her. We're happy. Very, very happy, Lily. I have something important to tell you. Lily climbed onto the sofa between them, looking back and forth between the two adults who had become the center of her world. Lily, Alexander said carefully, the test results came back and they show that I am definitely your daddy. Lily's face lit up with pure joy. I knew it, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Alexander's neck. I knew you were my daddy because you have my eyes and my hands, and you're nice to mommy. Alexander held his daughter for the first time as her father, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling a completeness he had never experienced before. Over Lily's head, he met Sarah's eyes and saw his own feelings reflected there. Love, relief, and determination to protect their family from anyone who might try to tear them apart again. Daddy, Lily said, pulling back to look at his face. Does this mean you're going to live with us now? Alexander looked at Sarah, seeing the question in her eyes as well. Lily, would you like that? More than anything in the whole world, Lily said seriously. Then you could read me bedtime stories and help me with my homework and teach me how to drive your fancy car when I'm big enough. Alexander laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. I think I'd like that very much too. But even as Alexander basked in the happiness of finally being united with his family, he knew that Rebecca wasn't going to give up easily. She had invested too much time and effort in keeping them apart to simply accept defeat. The battle for their family was just beginning. That evening, Alexander returned to his penthouse to find Rebecca waiting for him once again. But this time she wasn't alone. A tall man in an expensive suit stood beside her, and Alexander recognized him immediately from the photographs Rebecca had shown him, James Miller. Alexander, Rebecca said with false brightness, I'd like you to meet James Miller, Sarah's ex-husband. He has some very interesting things to tell you about the woman you are so eager to trust. James stepped forward with an apologetic smile. Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry to intrude, but when Rebecca told me about your situation with Sarah, I felt I had to warn you. Sarah Morgan is not the woman she pretends to be. Alexander studied both of them, noting how Rebecca's hand rested possessively on James's arm, how their body language suggested a partnership that went beyond simple acquaintance. Really, Alexander said mildly, how long have you two known each other? Rebecca and James exchanged a quick glance that they thought Alexander didn't notice. We just met recently, Rebecca said smoothly. Through mutual friends. When James heard about your situation, he volunteered to share his experience. How generous of him, Alexander replied. And what exactly is your experience with Sarah, Mr. Miller? James launched into a rehearsed-sounding speech about Sarah's supposed deceptions during their marriage, her alleged manipulation of men for financial gain, and her claims that Lily's father was a wealthy businessman who had abandoned them. As James spoke, Alexander watched Rebecca's face, noting the satisfaction in her expression as she listened to Sarah being systematically destroyed by a man who was supposed to have loved her. That's quite a story, Alexander said when James finished. There's just one problem with it. What's that? Rebecca asked, her confidence wavering slightly. Sarah and I had new DNA tests done today with maximum security protocols and independent verification. Lily is definitely my daughter, which means every word of what you both just told me is a lie. The color drained from Rebecca's face while James looked confused and slightly panicked. Alexander, that's impossible. The first test was tampered with. Alexander interrupted by someone with access to my doctor's office and knowledge of the testing procedures. Someone who called pretending to be acting on my behalf. Rebecca's composure finally cracked completely. Alexander, you're making a mistake. Sarah is using you just like she used James. Can't you see that? What I see, Alexander said calmly, is a woman who has spent 8 years raising my daughter alone because someone convinced me that the woman I loved had betrayed me. What I see is a pattern of manipulation and lies designed to keep me from my family. Alexander pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Rebecca, I think it's time we had a conversation with my security team and my lawyers, and possibly the police, depending on how cooperative you decide to be about explaining exactly how you managed to tamper with medical test results. James backed toward the door, clearly realizing he had been used as a pawn in Rebecca's scheme. Look, I don't know what's going on here, but I was just trying to help. Rebecca said you were being taken advantage of by the same woman who had hurt me, Mr. Miller. Alexander said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I suggest you leave now before you become any more involved in whatever Rebecca has been planning. After James fled, Alexander turned his full attention to Rebecca, who was standing in his living room like a cornered animal. 8 years, Rebecca. For 8 years, you've been manipulating my life, keeping me from my family, building a relationship based on lies. Why Rebecca's mask finally fell away completely, revealing the obsessive, calculating woman beneath. Because I love you, she screamed to her composure shattering. Because Sarah Peterson was never good enough for you. Because you deserve someone who understood your ambitions, who could match your success. What you loved was an idea of me, Alexander replied coldly. You loved my money, my status, my company. You never loved me because you never bothered to learn who I really am. I know exactly who you are, Rebecca spat. You're a man who throws away everything he's worked for because of some fantasy about a perfect family. You're a fool who can be manipulated by a dying woman and a child who isn't even. Rebecca, Alexander interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. Lily is my daughter, and tomorrow morning I'm going to call the police and report that medical test results were tampered with in what appears to be a deliberate attempt to defraud me and harm my family." Rebecca stared at him for a long moment, seeming to realize that her years of careful manipulation had finally collapsed around her. "Alexander, please, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but I did it all for love. For us." "There is no us," Alexander said firmly. "There never really was. You're fired, Rebecca. Clear out your office tonight. Security will escort you from the building." As Rebecca gathered her belongings and left his penthouse for the last time, Alexander felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. For the first time in 8 years, his life was completely his own, free from manipulation and lies. He picked up his phone and called Sarah, his heart racing with anticipation. Sarah answered on the first ring, her voice hopeful and anxious. "Sarah, it's over. Rebecca is gone, and I know the truth about everything about 8 years ago, about the DNA test, about all of it." Sarah's sob of relief was audible through the phone. "Alexander, does this mean—" "It means I love you," Alexander said, the words flowing from his heart without reservation. "It means I want to be Lily's father and your husband, and part of a family I should have had all along, Alexander." Sarah whispered, "I love you too. I never stopped loving you." "I'm coming over," Alexander said, already reaching for his car keys. "I want to read Lily a bedtime story tonight as her father." When Alexander arrived at Sarah and Lily's apartment that evening, he found them waiting eagerly at the door. Lily launched herself into his arms before he could even cross the threshold, her small body vibrating with excitement. "You're going to stay with us forever and ever." Alexander lifted her high into the air, savoring the sound of her laughter. "That's the plan, sweetheart, if it's okay with you and your mommy." The apartment felt different tonight, suffused with a warm glow of possibility that transformed the modest space. Sarah stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Despite her frail appearance, there was a new strength in her posture, as if Alexander's return had infused her with fresh determination to fight her illness. "Daddy, you have to see my room properly. Last time you were here, I was sleeping." Lily tugged at Alexander's hand, eager to show him her world. Alexander allowed himself to be led down the short hallway to Lily's bedroom. The small room was a testament to Sarah's love and creativity despite limited resources. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, adorned with Lily's artwork, and a hand-painted mural of a forest with fairy creatures peeking from behind trees. A tiny bookshelf overflowed with well-worn children's books, and a beloved stuffed elephant sat proudly on the carefully made bed. "This is Ellie," Lily introduced the stuffed elephant with solemn ceremony. "She's been my best friend since I was a baby. Mommy says you gave her to me before I was born, but I didn't know that until yesterday." Alexander's throat tightened as he recognized the small, gray elephant he had won at a carnival for Sarah all those years ago. The fact that she had kept it, had given it to their daughter, and woven him into Lily's life even in his absence touched him deeply. The evening unfolded with the tentative joy of a family finding its rhythm. Alexander read 3 bedtime stories to Lily, each followed by her insistence of just one more. Sarah watched from the doorway, her expression a mixture of contentment and disbelief, as if she couldn't quite trust that this happiness wouldn't be snatched away again. After Lily finally fell asleep clutching Ellie, and with one small hand holding tight to Alexander's finger, he gently extracted himself and joined Sarah in the living room. They sat close together on the sofa, speaking in hushed tones to avoid waking Lily. "I still can't believe you're here," Sarah whispered, her fingers tentatively tracing the contours of Alexander's face. "For 8 years I've dreamed about this, and now that it's happening, it feels almost too perfect to be real." Alexander captured her hand in his, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. 8 years ago, we let someone else write our story. This time we're taking back the pen." The metaphor hung between them, a promise and a shared understanding. But even as they reveled in their reunion, the shadow of Rebecca's manipulation lingered. Alexander filled Sarah in on his confrontation with Rebecca and James, explaining how deeply the deception had run. Sarah's expression darkened as she absorbed the extent of Rebecca's schemes. "She must have been planning this for years, Alexander. The level of calculation involved, it's disturbing. I'm filing for a restraining order first thing tomorrow," Alexander assured her. "And my security team is already working to ensure she can't access any company information or systems. The police have been notified about the tampering with medical records. What worries me isn't what she's done, Sarah confessed. It's what she might still do. Someone capable of this level of manipulation doesn't just walk away. The concern was valid, and Alexander felt a protective surge at the thought of Rebecca targeting his newly discovered family. I won't let her hurt us again, Sarah. Whatever it takes, I'll keep you and Lily safe. As the evening grew late, Alexander reluctantly prepared to leave. Despite his desire to stay, he recognized that their relationship needed time to rebuild, and Lily needed stability during this transition. They agreed he would return the following morning to accompany them to Sarah's treatment session, beginning the process of integrating their lives. The next morning brought new challenges. Alexander arrived early, bringing breakfast as he had before, but this time including Lily's favorite strawberry pancakes, a detail he'd gleaned from their conversations. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Alexander's phone rang the head of security from Walsh Technologies with an urgent update. Sir, we have a situation. Rebecca Taylor accessed the executive server last night before security escorted her out. She downloaded numerous files, including your personal correspondence and financial records. And sir, she's made some very troubling financial transactions. Alexander felt a chill as he listened to the details. Rebecca had attempted to transfer company funds to offshore accounts, had sent emails to key clients with falsified information about company instability, and had initiated a smear campaign against Sarah on social media, painting her as a gold digger targeting wealthy men. I'll be at the office in 30 minutes, Alexander informed his security chief. Lock everything down and call our legal team. Sarah watched his face closely as he ended the call, immediately sensing the shift. What's happened? Alexander explained the situation in measured tones, conscious of Lily's presence in the next room. He didn't want to frighten the child with adult concerns. Rebecca is attempting to cause problems, but we're handling it. Sarah's face paled. You should go deal with this, Alexander. Lily and I can get to the treatment center by ourselves. We did it for weeks before you came into our lives. But Alexander would not be swayed. My company has an entire team of executives who can handle a crisis. You and Lily only have me. We're going to your treatment together as planned. The rest can wait. This unexpected prioritization of family over business brought tears to Sarah's eyes. For so many years, she had shouldered every burden alone, making impossible choices between work and caring for Lily, between paying for medicine and buying groceries. The simple act of Alexander choosing them over his company represented a profound shift that resonated through her entire being. At the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, Dr. Martinez met with all three of them. The oncologist's expression was guarded but optimistic as he reviewed Sarah's latest test results. The experimental treatment is showing early promise. The primary tumors have decreased in size by approximately 15%, which is significant for just 2 weeks of therapy. Alexander felt a surge of hope squeezing Sarah's hand as the doctor continued explaining the treatment plan and potential side effects. Lily sat quietly beside them, swinging her legs and drawing in a sketchbook, but Alexander could tell he was absorbing every word. Her drawings depicted her mother surrounded by colorful beams of light that she explained were the good medicine fighting the bad cells. After Sarah's treatment session, which left her exhausted but determined, Alexander received another call from his office. The situation had escalated. Rebecca had given an interview to a business journalist alleging financial misconduct at Walsh Technologies and claiming that Alexander was emotionally unstable, making irrational decisions based on manipulation by a former girlfriend. Sir, our PR team recommends you make a statement immediately. The stock is already down 3 points and investors are calling. Alexander made a quick decision. Tell them to schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning at 9. I'll be there. And have our legal team prepare restraining orders, not just for me, but for Sarah and Lily as well. As they returned to Sarah's apartment, Alexander explained the latest developments. I need to go to the office for a few hours to handle this situation, but I'll be back tonight, I promise. Sarah nodded in understanding, though Lily's face fell at the news of his departure. But you just got here. Can't somebody else be the boss today? Alexander knelt to Lily's level, taking her small hands in his. Sometimes being a grown-up means taking care of problems even when we'd rather be doing something else. But I promise you nothing is more important to me than you and your mommy. I'll come back with dinner and we can watch a movie together. Lily considered this compromise with the seriousness of a contract negotiation. Can we have pizza and can we watch The Little Mermaid? The deal was struck with a solemn handshake, and Alexander departed for his office, his mind divided between corporate crisis management and the promise of a Disney movie night with his daughter. At Walsh Technologies, chaos reigned. The communications team had been fielding calls from journalists and investors all morning. The legal department was preparing litigation against Rebecca, and the IT security team was still assessing what information had been compromised. Alexander strode through the building with purpose, issuing clear directives and reassuring anxious employees. In his office, Alexander found James Miller waiting, looking distinctly uncomfortable under the watchful eye of a security guard. "Mr. Walsh, I need to speak with you. I swear I didn't know what Rebecca was planning." Alexander dismissed the security guard but remained standing, unwilling to offer the comfort of a seated conversation. "You have 5 minutes, Mr. Miller." James ran a hand through his hair, his expression genuinely distressed. "Rebecca contacted me 3 weeks ago, said she needed my help to protect you from Sarah. She told me Sarah was running a con, that she'd done the same thing to me. She had details about my marriage that no one should have known." Alexander's expression remained impassive, though his interest was piqued. "What kind of details? Private conversations, arguments Sarah and I had behind closed doors, information about our finances. Things that made me believe Rebecca must have been told by Sarah herself. She played me Mr. Walsh, and I'm ashamed I fell for it." As James continued his explanation, a disturbing pattern emerged. Rebecca had been surveilling Sarah for years, gathering information and planning contingencies. She had installed spyware on Alexander's personal devices, monitored his emails, and even placed listening devices in Sarah's apartment during her marriage to James. "She's obsessed with you, Mr. Walsh, and now she's furious. Last night after I left your apartment, she called me ranting about how you would regret choosing Sarah over her, how she would destroy everything you care about." Alexander felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The level of obsession James described went beyond revenge or wounded pride. Rebecca posed a genuine threat to Sarah and Lily. He immediately called his head of security, arranging for a protection detail to be sent to Sarah's apartment, and instructing his driver to take him there immediately after concluding with James. "I appreciate your coming forward," Alexander told James as the man prepared to leave. "I'll need your statement for the restraining order and potential criminal charges." James nodded solemnly. "I'll do whatever's needed. And Mr. Walsh, for what it's worth, Sarah is a good person. She tried to make our marriage work, but her heart was always with you. I was just too blind to see it." The unexpected endorsement from Sarah's ex-husband added another layer to Alexander's understanding of the woman he'd fallen in love with twice. Sarah had always been honest, even when the truth caused her pain. She had tried to build a life without him to find stability for their daughter, but had never pretended emotions she didn't feel. As Alexander's car sped toward Capitol Hill, his phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number he didn't recognize. His instinct was to ignore it, but something, perhaps the same intuition that had led him to question Rebecca's manipulations, made him answer. "Mr. Walsh, this is Nurse Jenkins from Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. Your Ms. Morgan has been admitted to the emergency department. She collapsed shortly after arriving home from her treatment today." Alexander's world narrowed to a pinpoint of fear. "Where's Lily? Is she okay?" "The little girl is here with her mother. She's the one who called 911. She's quite remarkable, kept completely calm, and followed the dispatcher's instructions perfectly. But sir, you should come quickly. Ms. Morgan's condition is serious." Alexander redirected his driver to the hospital, his heart pounding with fear. The nurse's careful avoidance of specifics about Sarah's condition suggested the situation was dire. As the car navigated Seattle traffic, Alexander found himself praying to a God he hadn't spoken to in years, bargaining for Sarah's life with promises of future devotion. The hospital emergency department was a flurry of activity when Alexander arrived. He spotted Lily immediately sitting in a chair much too large for her small frame, clutching Ellie the elephant and watching the door with desperate hope. When she saw Alexander, she flew across the room into his arms. Mommy fell down and wouldn't wake up. Lily whispered against his neck, her body trembling with suppressed tears. "I called the ambulance people like we practiced, but she still wouldn't wake up. Is Mommy going to heaven?" Alexander held her tightly, his own fear multiplying at the raw terror in her voice. "No, sweetheart. The doctors here are very, very good. They're going to help Mommy." A doctor in scrubs approached them, her expression grave but compassionate. "Mr. Walsh, I'm Dr. Chen, the attending physician for Ms. Morgan. Could we speak privately? Alexander hesitated, unwilling to leave Lily alone, but needing information about Sarah's condition. One of the nurses, sensing the dilemma, offered to sit with Lily and show her the fish tank in the waiting area. After ensuring Lily was comfortable with the arrangement, Alexander followed Durchen to a quiet consultation room. Ms. Morgan has experienced an acute reaction to her chemotherapy treatment. Her body is rejecting the protocol, causing multiple system failures. We're stabilizing her now, but I need to be clear. Her condition is extremely critical. The cancer has compromised her immune system to the point where fighting this reaction is extraordinarily difficult for her body. Alexander felt as if he were falling through space, untethered and helpless. We just found each other again. Lily needs her mother. There must be something more you can do. Dr. Chen's expression softened. There's a specialist at Johns Hopkins who's developed an alternative protocol for patients who react adversely to standard chemotherapy agents. I've consulted with him already, and he believes Ms. Morgan might be a candidate for his approach. But it would require transferring her to Baltimore once she's stable enough to travel. How soon could that happen? Alexander asked, immediately calculating logistics in his mind. Ideally within the next 48 hours if we can get her stabilized. But Mr. Walsh, I must emphasize that this treatment is experimental and extremely expensive. Insurance won't cover it. Alexander waved away the concern. Money is irrelevant. If there's even a small chance this specialist can help Sarah, I want her transferred as soon as medically advisable. I'll arrange for a medical transport plane and accommodations in Baltimore. As Alexander left the consultation room, his mind racing with plans and contingencies, he found Lily waiting for him, her small face solemn and too knowing for a 7-year-old. The nurse had clearly been unsuccessful at distracting her with tropical fish. Is Mommy going to be okay? Lily asked directly, her blue eyes so like his own, searching his face for truth. Alexander knelt before her, knowing that this extraordinary child deserved honesty, even if carefully framed. Mommy is very sick right now, but the doctors are helping her. There's a special doctor in a city called Baltimore who might be able to help her even more. We might need to take a trip on an airplane so Mommy can see this doctor. Lily processed this information with the gravity of an old soul. Will I come too? Or will I stay here with Mrs. Wilson? Alexander's heart broke at the question, at the underlying assumption that she would be left behind. You will absolutely come with us, Lily. We're a family now. Where Mommy goes, we go. Where you go, we go. No one gets left behind. The simple declaration transformed Lily's expression from worried resignation to cautious hope. She nodded once decisively, as if settling an important matter in her mind. Okay, then Mommy will get better because we'll both be there to help her. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of hospital vigils, medical consultations, and hurried arrangements. Alexander postponed the press conference, issuing instead a brief statement through his PR team, addressing the rumors spread by Rebecca and announcing a temporary leave of absence to address a family medical emergency. The stock price took another hit, but Alexander found he cared surprisingly little about this previously all-consuming metric of his success. Sarah remained unconscious, her body fighting to stabilize enough for the cross-country journey. Alexander hired a private medical transport plane equipped with state-of-the-art facilities and staffed with a specialized emergency medical team. He arranged for a suite at Johns Hopkins and secured the services of the top oncology specialist, Dr. Harrison Blackwood, known for his groundbreaking work with treatment-resistant cancers. Throughout this whirlwind of activity, Alexander maintained a calm exterior for Lily's benefit, but inside he wrestled with a terror unlike anything he had ever experienced. The prospect of losing Sarah just as they had found each other again was unbearable. The thought of Lily growing up without her mother as he had filled him with dread. He found himself making deals with fate, with God, with the universe, anything to keep Sarah with them. On the morning of the transfer, as medical staff prepared Sarah for the journey, Alexander received an unexpected visitor at the hospital. Detective Laura Morrison from the Seattle Police Department arrived with news about Rebecca. Mr. Walsh, we've apprehended Ms. Taylor, attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with forged documentation and a significant amount of cash. During the arrest, we found evidence directly linking her to the tampering of the day test results. We also discovered surveillance equipment and files indicating she's been monitoring both you and Ms. Morgan for years. Alexander absorbed this information with grim satisfaction. Will she remain in custody? Detective Morrison nodded. The judge denied bail given the flight risk and the serious nature of the charges. Ms. Taylor is facing multiple felony counts, including fraud, identity theft, corporate espionage, and illegal surveillance. She won't be troubling your family again. The news provided a measure of relief amid the crisis of Sarah's health. At least one threat had been neutralized, allowing Alexander to focus entirely on supporting Sarah and Lily through the challenges ahead. The medical transport to Baltimore proceeded without complications. Sarah remained stable, though unconscious, monitored constantly by the medical team. Lily sat beside Alexander on the plane, alternating between periods of quiet worry and bursts of questions about Baltimore, the special doctor, and what would happen next. Alexander answered each query with patience, marveling at her resilience and determination to understand everything around her. In Baltimore, Dr. Blackwood met them personally at the hospital, reviewing Sarah's case with focused intensity. His approach was direct but compassionate as he outlined the treatment plan to Alexander. We'll begin with a complete blood replacement therapy to remove all traces of the previous chemotherapy agents. Then we'll introduce a tailored immunotherapy protocol I've developed specifically for cases like Ms. Morgan's. The goal is to reprogram her immune system to recognize and attack the cancer cells without the collateral damage caused by traditional chemotherapy. Alexander appreciated the doctor's straightforward approach. What are her chances? Dr. Blackwood considered the question carefully. In similar cases, I've seen a 60% complete response rate. Given Ms. Morgan's age and the fact that she was showing positive response to the initial treatment before the rejection occurred, I'm cautiously optimistic. But Mr. Walsh, I won't sugarcoat this, the next 2 weeks will be critical. She may get worse before she gets better. The doctor's words proved prophetic. Sarah's condition deteriorated during the first week of treatment, her body struggling to adapt to the new protocol. Alexander barely left her side, sleeping in a chair beside her bed and returning to their hotel suite only to shower and change clothes. Lily divided her time between the hospital room where she read stories to her unconscious mother and exploring Baltimore with the kind-hearted nurse Alexander had hired as her companion during this difficult time. On the 10th day of treatment, as Alexander dozed in the hospital chair, his hand resting on Sarah's, he felt a slight pressure against his fingers. He opened his eyes to find Sarah watching him, her green eyes tired but alert for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. "You look terrible," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. "How long was I out?" Alexander felt tears spring to his eyes, relief washing over him in a powerful wave. 11 days, 4 hours, and approximately 26 minutes. Not that I was counting. A ghost of a smile touched Sarah's lips. "Where are we?" "This isn't Seattle." Alexander explained their journey to Baltimore, Dr. Blackwood's specialized treatment, and the progress reports that had been cautiously optimistic over the past few days. Throughout his explanation, he never released her hand as if afraid she might slip away again if he broke physical contact. In Lily's, Sarah asked her concern for their daughter, evident even in her weakened state. "She's amazing, Sarah, so brave and strong. She's at the hotel with Nurse Jenny right now, but she's been here every day talking to you, showing you her drawings. She never doubted for a moment that you would wake up." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I heard her sometimes through the darkness. Her voice was like a lifeline. Dr. Blackwood, when informed of Sarah's awakening, was pleased but cautious. "This is an excellent sign, but we're not out of the woods yet. The real test will be how her body continues to respond to the immunotherapy now that she's conscious. The next few days will tell us a great deal." Those days brought steady improvement. Sarah's strength returned gradually, her body responding to the innovative treatment with surprising vigor. Dr. Blackwood's cautious optimism evolved into genuine confidence as test results showed significant tumor reduction and improved organ function. Lily bloomed with joy at her mother's recovery, spending hours cuddled beside Sarah on the hospital bed, catching her up on everything she had learned about Baltimore and showing her the journal she had kept of their big adventure, as she called it. The bond between mother and daughter, always strong, seemed to deepen further through this shared trial. As Sarah's condition stabilized, Alexander turned his attention to their future. The small apartment in Seattle no longer seemed adequate for their family, yet he was reluctant to suggest they move into his penthouse, a space designed for a single businessman rather than a family with a child. During Lily's nap time one afternoon, he broached the subject with Sarah. "When we return to Seattle, I'd like us to find a new place together, somewhere that can be ours from the beginning rather than yours or mine." Sarah studied his face, reading the deeper meaning behind his words. You're asking me to build a life with you. Alexander took her hand, his expression earnest. I'm asking for much more than that, Sarah. When you're well enough, when we're back in saddle and settled, I want to marry you. I want to be Lily's legal father. I want us to be the family we should have been all along. Sarah's smile was luminous despite her still fragile appearance. Alexander Walsh, you have the worst timing. I haven't even combed my hair in 3 days. I'm wearing a hospital gown, and you choose now to propose? Alexander laughed, the sound lightening the hospital room's clinical atmosphere. I thought about waiting for a more romantic setting, but I've wasted 8 years already. I don't want to waste another day. 3 weeks after Sarah's awakening, Dr. Blackwood declared her ready to return to Seattle. The treatment had exceeded expectations, with scans showing a reduction in tumor size of over 70%. While not a complete remission, the progress was remarkable, and the doctor was confident that continuing the protocol in Seattle under his remote supervision would lead to further improvement. Before their departure, Dr. Blackwood took Alexander aside for a private conversation. Mr. Walsh, I want to be clear about Ms. Morgan's prognosis. The treatment has been extraordinarily effective, but cancer is unpredictable. While I'm optimistic about a full recovery, I can't offer guarantees. Alexander nodded in understanding. What can we expect in terms of ongoing care? Dr. Blackwood outlined a comprehensive treatment plan involving monthly infusions of the specialized immunotherapy, regular scans to monitor tumor response, and supportive therapies to strengthen Sarah's immune system. The protocol would continue for at least a year, with adjustments as needed based on Sarah's response. And what about long-term? Alexander asked the question that had been weighing on his mind. Will she be able to lead a normal life? Could there be more children in our future? Dr. Blackwood's expression softened at the underlying hope in Alexander's question. The treatment doesn't appear to affect fertility, though pregnancy would need to be delayed until she's in full remission. As for normalcy, Ms. Morgan is young and has responded remarkably well. With continued treatment and monitoring, there's every reason to believe she can live a full and active life. The return to Seattle marked the beginning of a new chapter. As promised, Alexander found them a new home, a beautiful house overlooking Puget Sound, with a garden for Sarah and a treehouse for Lily. The process of combining their lives proceeded with surprising ease, as if the years apart had been merely a pause rather than a separation. Sarah continued her treatments at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, gaining strength each week. Her hair began to grow back a softer shade of blonde than before that. Lily declared, extra pretty because it's new. She began working part-time from home, using her graphic design skills to create children's book illustrations, a dream job she had abandoned years ago due to financial pressures. Alexander restructured his work at Walsh Technologies, delegating day-to-day operations to his executive team so he could be home for dinner each night and present for Lily's school events. The company not only survived this shift in leadership style, but thrived under the more balanced approach, with employee satisfaction and productivity both increasing. 4 months after their return from Baltimore, on a perfect summer evening, with Mount Rainier glowing pink in the distance, Alexander formally proposed to Sarah. He had arranged a family picnic in their garden, with Lily's enthusiastic assistance in setting up twinkling lights in the trees and arranging Sarah's favorite flowers throughout the space. I know I already asked and you already said yes, Alexander began, kneeling before Sarah with a ring box in hand. But I wanted to do this properly, with Lily here as our witness. He opened the box to reveal not a traditional diamond engagement ring, but a unique design featuring 3 interwoven bands, rose gold, white gold, and yellow gold, each set with a different stone, a sapphire that matched Lily's eyes, an emerald for Sarah's, and a diamond in the center, binding them together. Sarah, you are the heart of our family, the center that holds us together. You gave me the greatest gift in Lily, and now you've given me a second chance at happiness. Will you marry me, build a life with me, grow old with me? Sarah's answer was a joyful yes, sealed with a kiss that made Lily giggle and clap her hands in delight. The ring slipped perfectly onto Sarah's finger, the 3 stones catching the evening light like a promise made tangible. They were married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony in their garden, with Lily serving as both flower girl and ring bearer, insisting on both roles with characteristic determination. Dr. Blackwood flew in from Baltimore to attend, bringing news that Sarah's latest scans showed an astonishing 98% reduction in tumor load, as close to complete remission as medically possible. The wedding was everything they had dreamed of, simple, meaningful, focused on the family they had fought so hard to create. Lily, dressed in a blue dress that matched her eyes, read a poem she had written herself, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the garden. Once upon a time, I wished for a daddy, someone brave and kind and true. I wished for my mommy to not be so sad, to smile the way she does with you. The universe heard and sent you to us, though the journey was bumpy and long. Now we're a family together at last, right where we all belong. There wasn't a dry eye among the small gathering of friends and family as Lily finished her recitation and solemnly handed the rings to the officiant. The vows Alexander and Sarah exchanged were personal and profound, acknowledging the path that had led them to this moment while looking forward to the future they would build together. In his vows, Alexander spoke directly to both Sarah and Lily. Sarah, you taught me that success isn't measured in stock prices or corporate acquisitions, but in moments of connection and love. Lily, you showed me courage isn't about fearlessness, but about facing what scares you with an open heart. Together, you've given me the greatest gift of family to come home to a purpose beyond myself, a love that makes everything else meaningful. Sarah's vows were equally moving. Alexander, 8 years ago, we lost each other to lies and misunderstandings, but our love created something beautiful, our daughter who brought us back together. I promise to trust in our love, to communicate openly and honestly, and to build the future we should have had all along. Lily, my brave girl, you have been my strength through the darkest times. I promise to be the mother you deserve, to nurture your spirit and to celebrate the amazing person you are becoming every day. As the ceremony concluded and Alexander kissed his bride, Lily spontaneously threw her arms around both their legs, creating a family embrace that the photographer captured in what would become their favorite wedding image. Three people who had found each other against impossible odds, united at last. The reception that followed was filled with laughter and dancing, with Lily insisting on teaching everyone her school's latest dance moves. Sarah, still rebuilding her strength, but radiant with happiness, danced with Alexander under strings of garden lights as the sun set over Puget Sound, her health and vitality, a testament to the power of advanced medicine and the strength of the human spirit. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Lily pulled both her parents aside for what she declared was a private family moment. She had prepared a surprise, a drawing she had worked on secretly for weeks, depicting the three of them in front of their home, surrounded by flowers and with a small dog added in the corner. I thought maybe we could get a puppy now that we're officially a family, Lily suggested with calculated innocence. I already picked out names: Hope if it's a girl, Chance if it's a boy. Alexander and Sarah exchanged amused glances at their daughter's strategic timing. We'll discuss the puppy tomorrow, Sarah promised. Tonight is about celebrating our family. Lily's expression turned unexpectedly serious. I knew you were my daddy the very first time I saw you, she told Alexander. I could feel it in my heart, even though I was scared you might not want us. Alexander knelt to her level, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Lily, finding you and your mommy was the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes the most important things in life come in the smallest packages, like a brave little girl carrying a letter. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep surrounded by wedding flowers she had insisted on keeping in her room, Alexander and Sarah stood together on their bedroom balcony, watching the moonlight play across the water. The future stretched before them, not without challenges: Sarah's continued treatment, Alexander's company, the everyday complexities of raising a spirited child, but filled with a promise neither had dared to hope for just 1 year earlier. Sarah leaned against her husband, her head resting on his shoulder. Remember when Lily asked us if we believe in miracles at the hospital in Baltimore? Alexander nodded, his arm tightening around her waist. I do. She never gave up hope, not for a second. Sarah turned in his embrace to face him, her green eyes luminous in the moonlight. I believe in 3 miracles, she said softly. The miracle of a love that survived 8 years of separation. The miracle of our daughter who was brave enough to deliver a letter that changed everything. And the miracle of second chances of the family we've become, despite everything that tried to keep us apart. As Alexander leaned down to kiss his wife, he silently added a 4th miracle to her list: the miracle of truth prevailing over lies, of light, dispelling darkness, of finding his way home to the family that had been waiting for him all along. Some letters changed destinies, and the one Lily had delivered had rewritten 3 lives forever.